Do you remember those scholastic book fairs from when we were kids? And sometimes there would be those books that had those just wild patterns on them, and the trick was, if you unfocused your eyes for the right amount of time, and you spun around 3 times, and you crossed one of your eyes, and then you stood on your head, a pattern would come out. Do you remember those? I could never get those to work. But I understand kind of what was going on there, and I do think that a lot of literature works on that same principle. The less directly that you look at it, the more things you can see inside it. And if some literature works that way, I think the absolute best horror literature works that way. While your mind is weaponizing against itself in the background. Welcome to Strip Coverlet, where we squeeze the bigger picture out of literature. I'm Adrian Fort, and we are here for another poetry discussion, which will appear in 3 different playlists here on the channel. Number 1 being the first video in the Classic Haunts playlist here on the channel. That is the playlist going into effect October 1st of 2025 to talk about horror and the horror genre all month long. Number 2 is the poetry discussions video, now over 800 videos strong. And number 3 is the horror playlist here, a compilation of a lot of the horror type stuff that I have talked about on this channel. The poem in question today is known as The Witch by Mary Elizabeth Coleridge, and it reads as such. I have walked a great while over the snow, and I am not tall nor strong. My clothes are wet, my teeth are set, and the way was hard and long. I have wandered over the fruitful earth, but I never came here before. Oh, lift me over the threshold, and let me in at the door. The cutting wind is a cruel foe. I dare not stand in the blast. My hands are stone, and my voice a groan, and the worst of death is past. I am but a little maiden still. My little white feet are sore. Oh, lift me over the threshold, and let me in at the door. Her voice was the voice that women have who plead for their heart's desire. She came, and the quivering flame sunk and died in the fire. It never was lit again on my hearth, since I hurried across the floor to lift her over the threshold and let her in at the door. So, what are we talking about in this poem? Well, the first stanza here is a woman who is making her way across the earth. Now, there's some strange things that she says. I have wandered over the fruitful earth, but later she's talking about how hard she has had it. So why is she choosing to forego the fruitful part of the earth? We have to question that, but I have never come here before. So she's talking about she is finding her way to a new place in the midst of a maybe not snowstorm, but a long winter. We'll say that. We'll say, just for the sake of argument, during a long winter. The cutting wind is a cruel foe, I dare not stand in the blast. My hands are stone and my voice a groan, and the worst of death has passed. That's a strange detail to suggest. The worst of death is past. Okay. It suggests that the speaker has died, but sort of by the ambiguity allowed in the English language, it could mean that the speaker is on the way to dying, not quite dead. I am but a little maiden still. So a maiden, a virgin, a woman who is not betrothed. Wow, kind of strange. So this is a poem I believe was published in 1896, something like that. A bit strange for a young woman to be walking out by herself in those times. Her voice was the voice that women have, so we get a change in perspective here. This third stanza starts us off with someone referring to her. The her being the individual who is speaking in those first two stanzas, we are left to assume. Her voice was the voice that women have who plead for their heart's desire. Oh, right, so I forgot. The first two stanzas, I should have mentioned this, end with this refrain, "Oh, lift me over the threshold and let me in at the door." It's a little weird, but okay. It suggests something that we'll get to in a moment. She came, and the quivering flames sunk and died in the fire. The moment she showed up, the fire in my hearth died. I had no more warmth in my home the moment she got here, since I hurried across the floor to lift her over the threshold and let her in at the door. Now, we're going to talk about a few different interpretations here, because there's a few different things going on, and like I said earlier, the less you look directly at these things, the more interesting they are in this poem. Sort of, I think, in reverse to a poet that I normally talk about on this channel. I talk about a lot on this channel, Emily Dickinson. I think the more directly you look at the poem, the more you are in tune with every statement in the poem, the better it is. There are some things here that you kind of, I think, are being counted on not to look at. You're being counted on to let these things wear away at your subconscious while your consciousness is reading through the words of the poem. And here's the first sort of interpretation, and I just have to get it out there because it is the obvious sort of, well, it's funny to me, so I have to say it. The first two stanzas are about a woman wandering. We don't know why she's wandering, but she's wandering. She's looking, she's searching, and she finds a man. A man who has his own home. She enters the home, and the hearth goes out, the fire goes out, there's no more warmth. Isn't that just the story of life? You take a woman in, you accept a relationship, and all of a sudden, everything in your life goes wrong. I don't think that is the actual interpretation of this poem, but it's just, it's on the page. I mean, it's there. It's on the page for sure. But so one thing, the next interpretation to talk about here is interesting because we have some things going on that are actual horror tropes. Okay, so we have at the end of these first two stanzas, "Take me over the threshold." A lot of these sort of more ancient traditions about evil, about devils, about demons, suggest that a nefarious spirit cannot enter your home unless it is invited in. I mean, this goes way back. This goes way back to the earliest religions and religious practices that we have, which suggests these practices that I refer to as we have, meaning that are written down. Like, these are very ancient beliefs to our species. So it is interesting to me that this would find its way into this poem, because that suggests that the earliest forms of religions we have suggest that you have to invite evil spirits into the home. Probably means that belief goes way before, way before the religion itself, way into pre-religious practices. There was a skull I'm going to talk about on my personal channel eventually, just found in China, which was basically a sister species to us, not an uncle or a cousin species, like a sister species to us, that was found in China 1 million years old, which suggests that our species might be 1,000,000 years old. The oldest stories we have are about 5,000 years old. So the oldest stories we have are 5,000 years old, but our species is 1,000,000 years old, perhaps? Well, how many stories have we lost along the way? From whence do these suggestions, like the fact that evil has to be invited into the home, from whence do they spring? But this idea here of the witch that is having to be taken over the threshold is interesting because the idea of the witch as a scourge or as a plague of sorts is an interesting one. Because a witch, I mean, think of it, we only have to go back a half a decade to understand what it was like to have this hysteria about disease. A witch is a person who I think we could all kind of agree metaphorically is walking with a disease. If that is the witch as a spell caster, the witch as a nefarious individual, imagine them as infected. And all of these sort of pretenses that we have about, prior to germ theory, etc., these pretenses we have about catching disease, and these pretenses we have about what keeps disease away, well, bad spirits having to be asked into the home. We have here the individual at the end, the man who takes her over his threshold. I lifted her over the threshold and carried her through the door. So, very interesting there, in my opinion. But we also have, my clothes are wet, my teeth are set. Doesn't say, why are you walking through the snow with wet clothes? Teeth being set, does that mean your jaw is clenched? These are details, small details, which when you don't look right at them, when you let them kind of play around in the back of your mind, are suggestive that someone is sick. My clothes are wet. Have you been sweating? My teeth are set. Do you mean your jaw was clenched? All sorts of these little things in here. The element of carry me over the threshold. If we're talking about things that we're looking at, but perhaps expected not to notice. Oh, lift me over the threshold and let me in at the door. I am but a weary traveler. I am about to collapse. Please help me into this shelter, right? That is the image that we're supposed to take from this. I am but a little maiden still. My little white feet are sore. Oh, lift me over the threshold and let me in at the door. Please help me in. I am so weak. Please help me in. Is that what that sounds like, though? Carry me over your threshold. Does that not sound like marriage? Another interpretation for this poem sort of circles around this. This is a Victorian-era poem. This is a woman on the prowl. That's what we get in the opening of this poem. A woman on the prowl, right? Is she searching to define and find and explore her own sexuality? She's ending both of these stanzas, Oh, lift me over the threshold. I am going to go find myself a husband to carry me over the threshold. I am but a little maiden still. My little white feet are sore. feel sorry for me. Let me entrap you. Don't you feel sorry for me? Come help me. I need that. Carry me over the threshold. This is a Victorian-era poem that ends in disaster. The fire goes out, and it was never put on again. Sunk and died in the fire. It was never lit again on my hearth, since I hurried across the floor to lift her over the threshold and let her in at the door. The Victorian era, very infamous, I suppose we could say, for the ideas of repression. Is this a poem condemning the act of seeking out sexual liberation? Now, it's interesting at the end here, because we don't know what comes of the woman. The man is ruined. Never was a fire lit in his house again. He had no light to see the way. He had no heat to warm the night. Take both of those things as metaphorically as you wish, as literally as you wish. They're in the poem. But maybe so I keep talking about things that are in the poem, but we're maybe expected not to notice, right? Things that are literally on the page, but kind of passed by us. Because they pass through our eyes, through our mind, and then they end up in the back of our mind. The very back of our consciousness, where we are processing them without noticing. What happens to the woman at the end of this poem? Does she die? Is she dead? She's seeking shelter. She's begging for help. But the fire goes out and we're left with the man's voice. The fire goes out and his life is ruined. Because he let this woman in. He helped this woman in. Is she dead? Or has she gone on to ruin the next individual? Being a Victorian-era poem, this may be an expression that seeking sexual liberation itself may be enough to portend doom. The final sort of interpretation that I want to get into here is less horror and more philosophical. So I think that one of the things that we have to at least try to keep in mind with poetry is not the fancy, is not the frivolous, but the actual meat and potatoes of what literature does. And what literature does is it teaches us about the world, teaches us lessons about the world without us having to learn those lessons, quote unquote, the hard way, right? So, this woman here in this poem, very hard life, it seems. She has worked. So if we're going to accept this as metaphor, let's accept it as metaphor. Going to the very beginning of the poem, I have walked a great while over the snow. I have had a long life that has gone through lots of cold and distance. I am not tall nor strong. I don't have the tools to succeed in life. I was not given those things that people love to have in order to make their day easier. I did not have those. My clothes are wet, my teeth are set. Even the clothes that I have on my back, things that I have earned, they're not the greatest. My teeth are set. I have worked and worked and worked. And the way was hard and long. It has been no quick path to whatever meager living I have. I have wandered over the fruitful earth, but I never came here before. There is goodness to be had. There is wealth to be had. I've never had it, and I'm trying something different. Oh, lift me over the threshold and let me in at the door. It would really help me out if I just had someone to accept me. If I just had someone to accept me. The cutting wind is a cruel foe. I dare not stand the blast. Some things are beyond our control. They're going to suck. My hands are stone, my voice a groan, and the worst of death is past. My hands are stone because I have worked them. My voice is a groan because I have not been living the greatest life, right? I have worn down my faculties, and the worst of death is past. Yeah. If the worst of death, what is the worst of death? Is it realizing you're going to die? If that means, if that is so, the worst of death being past means you have come to terms with the fact that you're going to die. And despite this, despite having done all of this work, despite having come all of this way, despite doing all of this and realizing, look, my life is limited. I am but a little maiden still. My little white feet are sore. Despite all of this, I have not made a home for myself. Lift me over the threshold and let me in at the door. I have no relationship. I have no one to love me. Let me in. Please, let me in. Metaphorically. And then she finds someone. She finds someone, and her voice was the voice that women have who plead for their heart's desire. Well, metaphorically or literally, that's kind of the same thing, right? She came in the quivering flames, sunk and died in the fire. So, I'm this fella. I had worked on my life a little bit. I had had a couple things going on. And then she came, and all of that wealth that I had, all of the vision that I had for my future, all of the warmth that I had through things that I had provided, all of the comfort that I had afforded was gone. Not only was it gone, it never came back since I let her in that door. So one interpretation that we could have here, philosophical. Some people struggle, right? So obviously that's the thing, but I'm trying to think of a way to say this that doesn't sound incredibly callous. One of the things that I think you will recognize as you go through life, probably you've already known some of these people, they just can't win. There's some people that you know, that you will know, that just can't win. And you won't be able to explain it. They won't be able to explain it. There is something somewhere in their life that keeps them from keeping a job, that keeps them from hanging on to money, that keeps them from making good decisions with people that they're going to be in relationships with, that keeps them from paying rent on time. Whatever the thing is, there are people that you know, I guarantee you, in your life today, that sabotage things for themselves. And when you invite people into your life who sabotage themselves, they will sabotage you. They do not mean to. They do not do it consciously. There is something about them that they cannot take a win. They will not take a win. They will not stack day on top of day. And because of that, depending on how deeply you accept them into your life, it will affect you too. And that is a tough lesson. Because a lot of times these people aren't bad people. A lot of times these people who suffer the slings and arrows of fate, we'll just say that, they're not bad people. They're just addicted to losing. I think that could be sort of an alternate interpretation of this poem. That is all I have for this poetry discussion. If you like or appreciate what it is that I do here, hitting a like button really does help me out, as it tells YouTube to share this video with other literature lovers if you find yourself here by chance but not design. This is the only thing I do here. I talk about literature, there's poetry every Monday, and as always, I hope to have you back for the next one.